Welcome to the Mac and Fish Podcast Weekend Update. In segment 1, we will discuss the Super Bowl. Tampa Bay Bucks win the Super Bowl and Tom Brady is a big reason why. But don't forget about that defense. Devin White, JPP, and Shaq Barrett had a major impact on the Tampa Bay Bucks win. In segment 2, we're going to discuss the transfer portal. How has the transfer portal affected college football and what will be the impact moving forward? In our final segment, we discuss the top quarterbacks in Florida and nationally. Well, we're back with another edition of the weekend wrap-up. I know it's Monday. We're back with another Mac and Fish, but it's the Fish Podcast today, like Corey likes to say.
It's the Fish Podcast.
Yeah, since it's just me today, but once again, we have our co-host filling in for, I think, the third or fourth week in a row is Corey Long of WalterFootball.com. And how are you doing, Corey?
I'm good. I'm great, man. It's another very good day. We got the Super Bowl is behind us. More importantly, 1AA college football is ahead of us. Like, this is actually a spring football that might work out, you know?
Well, you're in Tampa. I know you live in St. Pete.
I live in St. Pete.
I know but do they burn down the city? Can we at least maybe we could clean that place up a little bit?
I mean, like, you know, you live in Hollywood, and like it's like saying you live in Miami. It's the same thing. Like, you don't live in Miami, you live in Hollywood. That's the way it is in St. Pete. It's not as big of a deal here. You know, there's obviously lots of Buck fans that live here, but it's not like they live in Tampa. They live in St. Pete. So there's people here that don't care, and you know they're not going to hold a parade in St. Petersburg. They're going to do everything in Tampa. Like I said, even though the Dolphins won, you know, they weren't tearing down Hallandale. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I still consider myself the 305. Even though I live in Hollywood, I still keep that 305 number. But I have one friend. I haven't heard from him today. I'm kind of concerned. He's a Bucks fan. He's over 50. COVID didn't get him, but maybe this Bucks win finally. Yeah, maybe he just ended his life today.
That might have done it. That might have been.
I gotta tell you, my buddy Goose, man, I don't know where he's at. He hasn't answered his phone all day. A lot of drinking, I think.
I can imagine.
So, but we come back with another show, and you know, football season's over, but that doesn't mean we're going to end this podcast. We're going to continue through. But we're going to discuss the Super Bowl, of course, because a big game happened yesterday. But there's a couple other subjects we're going to touch on. We're going to talk about the transfer portal, which has had a major impact on college football. It's also had a major impact on high school football, and what's going to happen moving forward. Are a lot of high school prospects going to get left out? And we're also going to go over the top prospects nationally. This year's a great year for quarterbacks. I think, you look at, we saw two great quarterbacks yesterday play in the Super Bowl. How many of these kids are we going to look in the future and see them making impact not only in college football, but pro? This is a very good and deep class, not only in this, across the nation. I mean, the state of Florida may have 20 Division I quarterbacks signed next year, which is unbelievable in a state that isn't known for producing quarterbacks. But we're ready to get going. Corey, what do you think, man? The Super Bowl, I'm not going to lie. I'm a flat out hater. I hate the Bucks. I hate Tom Brady. You guys can all hate me for hating him. And it's not that, listen, I respect Tom Brady, just like I respect, LeBron James, any great player I respect, because to get to that level, you have to do so much. They are blessed. But football, unlike, we were talking about it today, football, unlike basketball, is a team sport. Yes, Brady had a major impact on the Bucks, but so did a lot of other players. I mean, there's a lot of players, they drafted Tristan Wirfs in the first round out of Iowa, and they needed a tackle, and he's going to play tackle. He may end up moving to left tackle next year, and and Smith may end up moving on, but they bring Gronk, who, he's towards the end of his career, but he has experience playing in the big games. They bring in Antonio Brown. I mean, Leonard Fournette looked like Earl Campbell last night. I mean, I don't know what happened. I mean, Jacksonville, they players must really hate playing in Jacksonville because see to play at an all-pro level once they leave between him and Jalen Ramsey. But what are your thoughts? I mean, they win the game, but don't you feel like some of these other guys on the team should get some credit? What about JPP? What about these other guys?
I mean, I think the defense, I think you start with, Devin, Devin Smith, I think his name.
Devin White.
Devin White, excuse me, not Devin Smith, Devin White. I was going to say Devin Bush, and I know that's not correct. So it was Devin White who had a tremendous game. I think he had 12 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a sack, a pick. I mean, he was everywhere. There's safeties, Antoine Winfield, great game. The Russians, really Vita V in the middle, big number 50, 340-pounder out of Washington. I mean, he's a difference maker because he takes on 2 blockers every time, and he can still push back the pocket. And he gives those Russians, he frees them up to be in one-on-one situations. So we knew, here's the thing. The bottom line is in the NFL, starters are harder to replace, especially high-end starters. When Eric Fisher went down for the Chiefs, it wasn't just their starting left tackle. It's a former number 1 overall pick at left tackle. So that's an elite offensive lineman. You've already got a backup on the right side. So now what they end up doing is moving a guard around. You start having to move pieces around. And I was surprised at how, the Chiefs really they didn't come up with a better protection scheme. They were just, I figured they would do protection. They'd be really into the quick passing. They'd be trying to go get the ball out of his hands fast. Let's put ourselves in third and manageable, stay on schedule. Don't, and we'll catch him with the big plays when they get caught cheating. But we're going to, we have to stay disciplined. And instead it was just normal. They decided they were going to run normal Kansas City offense, these elongated routes and everything, pushing the ball downfield. And there wasn't time to do that. So I think more than anything, I think the Chiefs coaches, Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy together, they really did not put together the right offensive game plan to win. And, I think the Bucs, they did what they do. They were very efficient on offense, didn't turn the ball over. They've been getting, I don't want to say they've been getting help from the officials, but, I've covered 4 Bucs games this year. One of their key plays is drawing pass interference. Like it's just a major part of their offense is drawing pass interference downfield. And, they were able to get some PI calls and some holding calls that kept drives going. That, right before the half, you get a pass interference call for, I think, 34 yards and another one, in the end zone. They basically put the ball in the end zone for them. So, it was surprising to hear at halftime, the halftime, crew was basically saying the officials they got to get out of the football game. So, it wasn't, you always hope, if nothing else, for a really exciting game. It wasn't that. It just wasn't a great game, unfortunately. And it ends, and the college football game wasn't a great game. And it ends a season that just frankly wasn't a great season, to be honest with you. You never want to go through this again.
You go back to the Andy Reid thing. Mahomes has never really had a game like last night. And sometimes you think maybe Andy Reid sat there, he'll bail us out at some point of this game. And maybe that's why he didn't, this may have been a good thing that, you're not going to always have your A or B game. Sometimes you just don't have it. And you need to make those adjustments. I just think that he's so used to, when was the last time Mahomes had a game like this? I don't think he's had one, not even as a rookie.
I don't remember ever having a game like this.
So he always would, if he had a bad start, he'd always find a way out of it. And that sometimes you sit there and you go, you know what, this guy's going to pull magic out of the hat. And it just didn't happen last night. And you're right with the offensive line. And they just weren't good. You could tell there was something wrong with the Chiefs last night. And they're going to have a lot of success moving forward. As long as you have Mahomes, you could do so much and build around him. The Bucs, it'll be interesting to see what they do. I think, once you win, man, a lot of guys want to get paid. Everybody's all in until you win, and then you got to get paid. And you know how that works out. There's guys on that roster that deserve to get paid more than they're getting paid. Shaq Barrett's contract's coming up. He deserves a nice raise. I mean, he's probably one of the best pass rushers.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if they can continue to pay their left tackle what they're paying, because there's other guys that are going to come up for contracts too.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Godwin, they're either going to have to franchise tag him or figure out something, because he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. They've got some things to do, but it's a lot easier to make moves when you've won the when you've won the title than it is when you haven't and when you're still trying to do it. But more than anything, I feel like I guess I'm like you in the sense to where it's like, you have to. This was a team thing. This was a huge team effort, and it was a great defense. And I mean, that was part of the reason why Brady came to Tampa Bay. Saw there was a good defense. They had good weapons before they signed Antonio Brown and Fournette, and also Shady McCoy, believe it or not, although he hadn't played very much since about week 12. But yeah, I mean, they were in a spot where they could bring in the guys that they could get and that they wanted, that he wanted. They were able to win, and good play for them. That's the best thing I can say. Is it's good for them.
No doubt. Well, it was hey, listen, good or bad games or whatever, football's football, and
Yeah.
we're gonna miss it. But before you know it, the summer will roll around, and the next season will move on, and whatever happened this year won't matter. There'll be 2 new teams probably in the Super Bowl next year, because that's usually how it works out. But that's segment 1. We're going to come back in a few minutes. We're going to talk about the transfer portal and what type of impact it's had on college football. We'll see you on the other side. In segment 2, we're going to discuss the transfer portal. How has the transfer portal affected college football, and what will be the impact moving forward?
Well, Fish, it's been a really, we talked about it. It's been a historic season and one to forget. And because of the things that have happened during this season, they have long-term ramifications. Bud Elliott wrote a story today in 24/7 Sports where he mentions that there are about 400 less kids signed out of high school to FBS programs than there were over the general trend of there's usually about 2,600. This year, there are about 2,200. And, part of that is a portal. Part of that is COVID. A lot of kids, when you look at the states, didn't play football this year. Part of that is the extra year that kids are given. So that meant some teams had to maybe manufacture their roster numbers a little bit, manage their roster numbers differently. I don't see this being a long-term problem unless we have another year of COVID, then in which case I think it becomes an issue. What do you see? Is there something else you could pinpoint as to where the numbers are low? Do you think they'll get back up to where they need to be next season?
I think they need to. We've talked about it before. I'm not a huge fan of the portal. I mean, it basically is it's a Band-Aid to fix problems that, prior coaches created and now the new staff's created, and you're trying to work your way out of problems the quickest way possible. But, I think the NCAA has some decisions to make. We talked about it. Do you sit there and the guys that were part of this year's high school class, a lot of them are not going to get to play. Should they be punished because they didn't play? All right, so if they go to JUCO or prep school, should their clock really not start this year? Should they just be given a one-time waiver on that end? Because a lot of those guys, if you go to JUCO, it's really for guys that don't have good grades usually. Why, if you do have the grades, you're eligible, you're a Division I prospect, but these schools decided, hey, we're not going to give out those extra scholarships this year. We're going to wait till next year. What do you think? Should they hold off and give these guys basically a fifth year of eligibility right off the bat and make these kids this class a 5-year plan where they could basically have 5 years of eligibility? Or what are some of the options that you would recommend, Corey?
I mean, It's hard to say. I think the one area you can start, and this will seem a little fair, is you might have to just put the same way you cap 25 in your scholarship class, you might have to put a 4 or 5, some sort of a cap on transfers. And, that's going to kind of change, one, the eagerness to transfer, and two, it makes, if you're only allowed to take 3 transfers a year, you're going to have to go out there and recruit high school players. What I understand I don't like is that high school football is the lifeblood of college football. That's the natural progression. I don't like the idea of coaches, and you've seen many, and I've seen many that are going to the portal to basically recruit their classes. They're not talking about getting a filler in an offensive tackle, or that cornerback that we need, to replace somebody. We're talking about teams getting 10, 12 or more players out of the portal. At that point, that's just basically being your recruiting class. That, I think, is an issue.
My big concern is, all right, you talked about Eric Fisher before. He was a guy that I believe he went to Central Michigan. Here's a guy that was the first player in the draft. All right, Central Michigan has a player like Eric Fisher now, or Eastern Michigan, or one of these MAC schools, or one of these FBS schools. They have a player that's potentially a first-round pick, a Khalil Mack. Now you have you basically eliminate. You're talking about the transfer sitting out 1 year even. You're going to have a problem, I think, in college football, where these lower schools are basically going to become like the minor leagues for the SEC and ACC schools and the Big 12. I just think that could become a major problem. I don't think that those schools should be punished because they found kids and then developed them, and now, all right, everybody's going to poach their kids.
Yeah, I think that's also a big concern when you look at, like, if Khalil Mack was right now in college and playing at Buffalo, would he stay there? Probably not. He'd probably end up deciding after 2 years, I'm going to just go to a really big school and play in marquee games, because, for most of those kids, the NFL is still the goal. And, the best way to get attention in the NFL is to play in the games that see the most eyes. You're not going to do that, with the Akron Central Michigan game, unfortunately, happening on, Tuesday night. So I think it's up to it's a weird situation, because I'm not against the portal. I certainly think players have the right to explore options, especially when coaches do it so freely. But, I also do feel like you said, you should be rewarded for putting together a good class, a good group of recruits, that should be a reward. It shouldn't be something that is being held against you because, through the transfer portal and other things. So I just feel like, unfortunately, you've opened up the portal. There's a can of worms. You can't put them back in a can. So that's done. So I think you've now got to manage the portal. As the governing body, the NCAA has to manage the portal and make sure that teams aren't taking a dozen kids out of there. It's not meant to be a grab bag. It's meant to be a place where kids can transfer and play and provide help at a position, provide immediate help at a position.
I mean, the whole reason transfers used to happen as a kid, somebody got sick in a family, they had to play closer to home. That was the only way they were able to get a waiver. You weren't able to just sign. It was like, if you transferred, you had to sit out a year. Is the NCAA going to go back to unless you're a grad transfer? If you're an actual player that's a freshman, if you transfer to another school because you want to transfer, are they going to make these kids sit out a year, you think? Or do you think it's already happened and now they're not going to go back?
I agree. I think once you open up those can of worms, you can't take them back. You can't. That's the bottom line. But I do think that they can limit what the coaches are able to do, and we see it. Especially when you talk to FCS coaches, you think the FBS is bad. Some of them coaches, I remember a long time ago we went to Savannah State. This is long before the portal, and the coach there was basically like, "Hey, give me every bounce back you have that played Power 5 last year." They weren't even going to try to recruit a kid.
Well, if I'm the FCS schools, I wouldn't go to the transfer portal. I would honestly, especially this year, there's so many high quality Division One kids. I mean, if there's 450 kids less that sign with Division One schools this year, would you rather go to that route and find somebody that you've recruited and wants to be at your school than to go into the grad trade? I mean, I don't know if you're getting kids that go down. Like, how much motivation do a lot of those guys have? You know, hey,
Yeah, it's just a slippery surface, and you and I talk about it. We don't like, we're not. I'm not fans of coaches that use the portal as part of their recruiting package. There's always going to be a situation where your tackle gets hurt in the spring game, or you're a little thin at a position. You need a quarterback that can come in and play, and that happens. And you're going to need a player or two, but coaches are starting to look at that, a little bit too much like it's part of the recruiting process. And it's even worse because now they've got real college film on a lot of these kids.
Well, look at Texas State. They said, the coach said, we're not going to sign one high school kid. We're going to take 25 transfers. Are you really going to win with 25, 30 new kids that come in? I just
– it's ridiculous to think so.
I mean, these kids are leaving a program for a reason. You're having 25 guys that they're not leaving because they're happy. And now you're going to win like that? I don't know. They're going to have to make some parameters and rules in the like you said, hey, you can only sign 5 transfer kids a year. You can only sign so many every 4 years. You can't just have schools picking off 20 kids a year out of the transfer portal. It's bad for football. I don't think you're teaching guys the right things. I mean, the whole purpose of them going to school is not just football. They're learning life lessons that, hey, listen, you know what? Well, I don't like it at the high school level. Every time a kid doesn't play, they transfer another high school. It's, do you really want that type of kid on your football program? That just quits.
Bottom line, all transfers should have to sit out a year.
That should be period number one.
Shouldn't be any waivers or anything like that.
Yeah.
You sit out a year if you transfer. If you're in the portal, if you're not a graduate transfer, you don't have a degree, you sit out a year when you transfer. That alone stops some of the transferring.
Well, I'm sure we'll, come upon this subject again down the road because it's a constant moving thing, and I think it's an interesting subject to talk about because there's, it's affected college football. I mean, it really has, and you've seen some of these programs. You look at what Justin Fields did at Ohio State. I mean, he basically put them in the playoffs this year and last year, and it gave them an opportunity to play for a title, which they probably, like you said before, they would have still found a quarterback, but maybe they're not in that Final Four, and that's extra money for that school. So it shows you how much of an impact a transfer could have on your program financially. Well, that's the end of that subject. Our last subject that we're going to go over is quarterbacks and the 2022 class, and we'll be back. In our final segment, we discuss the top quarterbacks in Florida and nationally. Well, we're back for our final segment. We're going to talk about the 2022 class of quarterbacks. Probably one of the better classes that we've seen in a while. The last time you had 2 really elite guys was Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence coming out. But this year, you already have 4 or 4 guys that are top-end quarterbacks that have already committed. Quinn Ewers, I believe his name is, out South Lake Carroll, Ohio State. He was originally committed to Texas. You have Gunnar Stockton out of Rabun County, Tiger, Georgia High School. Walker Howard out of St. Thomas More in Louisiana, Lafayette, Louisiana. Corey, it's a great year, and it's a deep year. I told you before, I mean, the state of Florida alone is probably going to have 20 high school quarterbacks that go. One of them left, Brandon Davis. He was at Lake Minneola. I think he transferred back to the Northeast. He's going back to school in Delaware. I would assume that since they didn't play last year in that area, He came down to Florida to play for one season. He's a very talented quarterback, and it brings the talent level down a little bit. But AJ Duffy, who's probably a 5-star quarterback out of Arizona, transferred in, or he's from California actually. What do you think of this year's class? You got some great quarterbacks. We talked about it. You don't win without one. And
absolutely not. And this year you got some guys that are pretty interesting. We talk about Duffy, who I think is by far the best of the bunch. You got Chad Masco, who was a Florida State commit for a while. Under Willie Taggart, back that a long time ago. But he's he's going to be a D1 kid. You can go all the way far down as guys like Zion Turner, who's at Aquinas. He I think is going to have a chance to be a D1 kid. This year it's really a deep group, and it's an exciting group, and they can make plays, and they're fun to watch. And I think with a lot of them, there's some intriguing upside and growth. So I mean, it's just, to me, it's always about picking the right player at quarterback, as because regardless of what you have around you, you need a difference maker at quarterback. We've outlined the days of the game manager at quarterback, and a situation where having Julio Jones will make Greg McElroy look good. Having a top end receiver just to make a quarter. Those days are over. The quarterback has to be a big player in your system. If case in point, you can look to Georgia. The only thing that's kept them out of the playoffs more is the fact they can't get the quarterback position right. And when you look at somewhere else, you take a look at USC, where we both tend to think that without that kid at quarterback, Slovis, they're a 500 team?
They're not very good. I mean, you're probably talking about they definitely. He helped win the UCLA game last year. They would have lost to UCLA. It's crazy, but it's such an important position, and there's so few of them. That's why this year's huge, because you look at some of the teams, they need quarterbacks, and there's a bunch of them that are going to come in. You look at Alabama. They took a kid out of Jacksonville Bulls and Mac Jones. We've discussed this before. He was probably a 2 or 3 star quarterback. Probably was a gap filler between one 5-star and another 5-star, and they just happened to roll the dice. And I think this is why it's so important we discuss this. You got to sign 1 or 2 quarterbacks every year. You cannot have a class without one. One of the guys that fits that criteria, there's a kid, Davin Widener, from Holy Trinity this year, and he's 6'4", probably 220 pounds. He's got great film. One of the things is his name's been brought up. I've been asked about him on message boards and through friends, and what do you think of this kid? And the only concern is Holy Trinity's not a big school. Marcus May did come out of there, so that's a positive. But you always have those. There's a reason why Paxton Lynch went to a small private school in Deltona and ended up at Memphis. It's a concern when you're going that big of a jump up from one of these small private schools that doesn't play a lot. It's not like St. Thomas or American Heritage or Gibbons. Even if you're one of these small private schools down here in South Florida, or in Tampa or St. Pete, you're going to play some teams outside of your, comfort zone. The Tampa Catholics, the Jesuits, they play bigger programs. So you don't have to worry about guys playing and then getting freaked out once they see that higher talent level. But that is a concern with this Widener kid, or I think he would be possibly the number 1 quarterback in the state of Florida. But that's the biggest concern. What do you think of some of these guys? Is there anybody that has caught your eye outside of these names that interest you?
Well, I've had a chance really to look at a lot of the quarterbacks in the past. We're looking at the past couple of weeks and really have a chance to look at them. I don't know if he's ready yet, and you could tell me more because you watch this school a lot more. The kid down at Palmetto, Kevin Smith, kind of interesting to me. Interesting player. I don't know. I feel like he's one of those guys that maybe 3 years down the road, we could look at he could be having a very nice college career, and he just didn't. He just wasn't able to get because it takes a longer time for certain players to develop. But I've seen what I've seen in there. Palmetto's offense left a lot to be desired last year.
Well,
But I look at him and I'm like, he's got good size. He can throw. Maybe there's something there.
Kevin's going to need a very good quarterback coach in college.
Yeah,
he
I agree.
he's got the arm, but he's inconsistent. He'll make a beautiful throw, and then the next one, he's wild. And I think a lot of that's mechanical. It's footwork. I mean, listen, I remember watching Christian Ponder at the Florida State camp, and he couldn't hit the side of a barn. And I remember talking to one of the coaches not that long after, and they're like, "Hey, you know what? Ponder's going to end up a first-round pick." And I chuckle. I go, "Is he even going to play?" And they're like, "No, he's the real deal." And I think that's the biggest thing is you got to be careful when you're evaluating these guys, and you just have to look at the NFL draft. Most of these quarterbacks don't come from big schools; they come from North Dakota. There's another North Dakota quarterback getting drafted this year. The kid,
Trey Lance, who's out of Minnesota originally, but the area he's in the Upper Peninsula of Minnesota, so definitely not an area you go looking for a quarterback.
And look, the kid at BYU wasn't a heavily recruited kid. He was someone that Utah and BYU wanted. He wasn't, and that's the one thing with the Kevin Smith. If he goes to the right program and he's developed, and he has the right people around him, he could probably develop into a pretty good quarterback. He's probably best off not going to a big school where there's pressure on him right away. He needs to take that red shirt, accept the fact that he has a lot to learn from, knowledge. There's a lot of knowledge to the game. I mean, you get the offense they run it at Palmetto, and I'm not trying to knock the coaches. It's basically a Pop Warner offense. They've got a lot to learn as far as reading defenses, how to work to become a great quarterback too. That's something too. There's a lot of guys that have talent, and we've seen it over the years. I mean, Xavier Lee at Florida State. You got to have to work hard to become great. I mean, there's just some guys that have the talent, but there are some quarterbacks here that are, we know that Florida State got a commitment last week from Nico Marical. And then you look at Miami and Florida right now. I know like MJ Morris is in the mix. I know Miami's recruiting MJ Morris. Florida State wants to pull him. The Ja'Curry Brown guy from Lowndes High School. I watched his film, and I don't want to compare him to Cam Newton because that'd be unfair to this kid. But you see some similarities. He's a big, strong, physical kid. He runs. His strength is running.
Yes.
But you see the arm strength. He can push the ball down the field. He can create the big plays. You look at those. I hate to say it because I'd never try to push kids to schools. But if I was educating this kid on the different offenses, he'd probably be wise to go play for Dan Mullen and the Florida Gators just because of what he could do and his fit to that offense. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when I saw him, my first thing was his size and that tantalizing arm talent. It's kind of like the one thing with quarterbacks is you got to have the ability to make plays. It's kind of like in basketball what the recently passed John Chaney said. It's basically like don't ever pass up a shooter. I can always teach a shooter how to play defense. I can't teach a defensive kid how to shoot. If a kid has playmaking ability, you can teach him you can work with his passing game and figure out how to fine tune it to work around his abilities as a playmaker. The problem is when you get to the point where they don't have that elite level athleticism. They don't show, when they need everything to be on schedule to work. When it's like, I say like the who are guys you could think of like Drew Weatherford is one. Several quarterbacks in Miami over the years where so many things have to be working for the quarterback to be productive. The line's got to pick up every block. The running backs have to take on their chips and they have to get out of the routes. Receiver, like there's no room for breaking the play out of schedule. There's no room for a breakout play. So I think when you get these really exciting playmaking quarterbacks, there's just a lot to work with there,
Yeah, football's not things don't go according to plan. You saw it last night in the game. But I will tell you the one guy that, I went through a lot of these quarterbacks. The one guy that really caught my eye, and it's crazy, he's a 3-star on 247, is Tavon Jackson out of Center Grove High School. He's out of Indiana. Here's a guy that honestly, if he develops, you could be talking about the first pick in the draft. I mean, big time arm, makes all the throws, really athletic. And you could tell his ability to push that ball around the field. The players around him know he could do it, and I guarantee you, he's not working with the best skill sets in Indiana, but he's putting up big stats, and I'm a big fan of his.
Yeah, no, I love I love his frame. I feel like when he fills out, you're going to get a big 235-pound kid that can run, that can throw, has a big arm. More than anything, he looks like when I look at quarterbacks now, I try to look at how the team around them, how hard they play for him, how they can respond to him. And he looks like a kid that has a little bit of a presence about him. I want a quarterback that's got a presence, that when he steps in the room, it gets the team's attention. They know that the man is in there, that they trust him, that he can lead them to where they need to go. And I think that was one of the things. Florida State had that with Jameis. Florida absolutely had it with Tim Tebow. I can't say that Miami had it with Ken Dorsey. They could have used Ken from the Barbie doll set and probably won a title.
Dorsey, but Dorsey.
But you know what I'm saying.
Dorsey understood that he didn't have to be the guy.
He knew what he was. He knew what he was.
He's like, let me just get it into these playmakers' hands, and we're going to win. I was at a.
Now with Miami, you see it with De'Aaron King. Yeah. You see it with King because guys respond to him being in their program.
No doubt, man. He made a major impact, and he makes the players around him better, and that's what you need now in college football. I did go to a 7-on-7 yesterday. I watched a guy. He's out of New Jersey, Devin Cargman. He's out of Woodrow Wilson. Now, the reason I bring him up, he has a bunch of Division I offers. He's got like Rutgers and Buffalo, Maryland, Texas A&M's offered, Virginia Tech, some of these other programs, Wisconsin may end up offering. But the one thing I noticed, and this is why I liked watching him live yesterday, is there was a major adjustment for him when he played the top Florida team. You saw it, he got those sacks where the buzzard went off. Everything was moving a lot quicker. And when those Florida kids stepped up, what's crazy is the Florida team lost the first game, actually got blown out. And the Florida team, the Mortals, had to win back-to-back games in the finals to win the championship. And not only did they win, I don't think the other team scored. And it showed you just he's going to have, and it's not a knock against the kid because he was a big, strong, physical kid. You could tell he's going to be a pocket passer, but he's a guy that's going to have to learn how to think quicker. Yesterday wasn't a good experience for him because a lot of guys, they get against these Florida kids and it's a major adjustment period for them when they see everything moving twice as fast. Like you could tell everything was moving so much faster for him. What do you think about that?
Don't we always see, and you can kind of tell, I'm going to give you a guy that I saw it from day one. A kid named Jeff Driscoll, who was a 5-star quarterback out of, what school was he out of? It was an Orlando area school. It was brand new.
It's literally right across the street from
Hagerty.
Hagerty.
And they were brand new at the time, so I remember going down to one of his games and you could see his talent. You could see that he could run. Physically, he looked the part. And he played with players that were nowhere near as good as him. I think there was one other kid on a team that might have been like an FCS prospect. The rest of the kids were, they were still going through their first run of kids at the program. So there just wasn't a lot there. And, my thing, everybody loved them. And my big thing was, there was a lot of comparisons to him and Teddy Bridgewater came out at the same time. And my big thing was always, I want to see Driscoll in Under Armour game because I want to see him how he handles playing with better players when his timing has to be on, not just on the opponent's side, his own side. Wide receivers that are running breaks out of their breaks a lot quicker than he's used to. With Teddy playing down in Miami and going through that hardcore the hardcore off-season 7-on-7 schedule, you knew that Teddy, if nothing else, was battle tested. He saw great players. He knew what they looked like. He knew how to, he knew the challenges that awaited him. And, and Driscoll wasn't bad in the Under Armour game itself. I think he ran for like a 70-yard touchdown. I don't know if he completed any passes. He might have completed one or two. I just remember during the practices all week, he just looked a step behind. He looked slow. Like he just looked like, like the clock wasn't coming on quick enough for him to get the ball out on time. And he turned out to be he's had a long pro career at this point. I mean, he's been in the league for like 5-6 years. So, good on him for that. But, you kind of knew, you always wonder when you see kids in certain situations, how they're going to react when they're faced against better competition, against a better set of circumstances. There's some kids that just it doesn't work for them. Preston Dewey, a kid out of Texas that was committed to Miami. It just didn't work. I can tell you the first time I saw about the Under Armour game, I remember I called you. I'm like, this kid I can't play. He can't play at Miami. He can't play. I don't know if he can play most of these places. He just wasn't good. He was slow. He couldn't get the ball out of his hand. He couldn't get anything done.
And that's why it's very important that these guys pick a school that they could develop. You talk about Driscoll. Driscoll went to Louisiana Tech. There wasn't as much pressure on him.
Yeah.
He went to an offensive-minded coach. They developed him a little bit. And now, like you said, he's been in the league for a while. So the physical talent, the NFL talent was there. I mean, I think he was also a baseball player. So he had great upside. But a lot of these kids, they all want to go to these big time schools, and you don't have to go to those schools, especially at that position. You see the drafts. Once again, a lot of these guys that are getting drafted are not going to the bigger schools. I mean, even Kyler Murray Kyler Murray was at A&M, but Baker was at Texas Tech before he went to Oklahoma, so he got experience. You don't have to go to these elite schools and to become a great quarterback.
Of course not. I think you have to go in a situation that fits what you do as a player. Jacoby Brissett is another great example we can take. Charlie Weiss recruited him to Florida. Charlie Weiss loved what he had to offer. Charlie Weiss ran a pro-style offense. Will Muschamp was a coach of Florida at the time. He hated Charlie Weiss, couldn't stand him. They just didn't like each other. So he only lasted a year. And there was always that friction between Driscoll and that Gator staff the following year because Driscoll didn't believe that any of them wanted him there and that they were sabotaging him. He left. He went to NC State to Dave Doreen, who was, who one, welcomed him with open arms, and then two, realized, the skill set that Brissett had, played to it, played around it. A lot of these guys, Lamar Jackson, if he goes anywhere else other than Louisville under Petrino, I can't think that he's going to have the same amount of success.
No,
where a great quarterback guy who looked at him like the really unique athlete he was and said, I got to figure out ways to get the most out of this guy.
Yeah, and that's what good quarterback coaches do. There's very few of them that can see that and they develop it. You see it at very few colleges. A lot of these guys, that's why a lot of them struggle, but once they get there. But it's by far the most important position. That's why we're discussing it today. But I'm excited to see how this 2022 class goes. There's guys that are at the top of the list, I believe, are a bit overrated from what I saw. And I think there's going to be guys that jump up and take that top spot this year, that first or second spot nationally. And a few of these guys are going to be playing for playoffs and national championships. But
yeah.
So, well, Corey, it was once again great to have you on the show.
I appreciate it, man. It was a fun time another week. We got a lot more to discuss, man. This 2022 stuff happens quickly, man. It comes at you fast. One cycle ends, the other one begins.
Well, we're gonna have to discuss. I know we're gonna at some point we're gonna have some draft talk since you are part of the one website that does mock drafts on a daily and weekly and hourly basis. So I used to do that myself to see how well I could do, and it's always I still have some of my draft books where I go back and look and say, oh man, I was right on that guy. So I feel good about a few of them, but it would be fun, honestly, if I could ever just be a GM. I don't think I could do much worse than some of these guys that they're general managers of pro football team.
I gotta remind you. I had a draft book. A friend of mine from high school, who's works in the military, and has always had a great interest in draft and in draft eval. We did a draft book. It must have been 6, 7, 8 years ago, that I still keep. And I was really proud of it. And it's something I've always wanted to go back to, and really, but man, you got to watch a lot of film. You really got to prepare 12 hours a day to watch film, because there's so many players out there. I don't think you really get an idea of how many players there are in college football until you're doing draft prep, because you're not just talking about the SEC or just talking about one conference. You're talking about every player in D1, half the players in the FCS, players that, the HBCUs. I mean, that's why pro football teams have about 40 scouts working for them, because they got to be everywhere. There's the Green Bay Packers have a scout that's sitting there watching some, D3 football started last week. He's sitting there watching some D3 game in 18 inches of snow in Whitewater, Wisconsin, trying to see if he can find one kid and they might be able to bring in as an undrafted free agent, because it'll improve their special teams coverage.
Well, they just got to find one Pierre Garçon, but hey, listen, it was great. What we'll do is we'll put together a draft book one year and see how we do on the whole thing. But like I said, once again, I enjoyed this, and I'll talk to you again next week. For those that want to follow us at the Mac Fish Podcast, is the Twitter account.
Fish Podcast.
So, but we'll see you again next week, man. Take it easy.
Take care.